Good morning. I'm so glad you're back in my studio with me today. And today we are talking about these adorable cutters that I received from California or SoCal Cutter Company. That's Southern California Cutter Company. And Felix and Ginger are just adorable, and they sent me some wonderful supplies to try out with polymer clay and air dry clay. On top of that, those cutters, they also make their own silk screens for clay. And if you haven't heard of these or seen these, we're gonna have lots of fun with these today. So let's get started. I have some polymer clay already prepped and ready to go in the oven. It's all right here. And I'm gonna show you how I did that, but we're gonna use air dry clay today because I couldn't do these ahead of time because they would dry too quickly, and I can show you what happened before when I was experimenting with it. It's not pretty. So I have one little smidgen of polymer clay left from this batch that I was doing. So we'll do that side by side with the air dry clay. When I do air dry clay, I have become really addicted to this DOS modeling clay. It's the only one that I care to use anymore. The Crayola brand Model Magic is still really fun. It's very lightweight. It's very dry and easy to manipulate. If you're going to do some projects with kids, or if you're a little bit nervous doing it yourself, that's a great one to start with. I feel like I have more control with the DOS clay. This is sealed up really well. I'm working to get into it. Because they keep it really nice and moist in there. And don't worry, it looks gray, and it will look gray to you until it dries out. Just make sure that you buy the package that is white. They also make a terracotta one. So if you want to do something in terracotta, that works great too. Okay, so I've got my camera now set up where I think you can see pretty well. And when I work on clay, I work on this large sheet of tempered glass that I had purchased at a thrift store many years ago. And here is a chunk of the clay that I cut off of that package. Now, if I was just doing this for myself, I would be running this through my pasta machine. But I am going to assume that some of you do not have access to a pasta machine, that you are just really discovering clay. That's kind of what we're about today. So I want to keep it simple in terms of the supplies, knowing that if you get caught with the clay bug, you can always invest in a pasta machine. They're not that expensive, and they sure make for a great end product. And I just keep flipping this and rolling this and trying to get rid of all the lines in it. And you certainly want to get rid of any air bubbles that might be trapped in there. So you will see air bubbles pop up as we go through this, if they're there. Now, when I get down low enough, one of the tricks, you do need some kind of a roller. And I love the acrylic rollers. I'm gonna post some down below that you can order off of Amazon. Make sure when you order one that you get a solid one. See, the end of that is solid. This is solid acrylic. They make them now that are hollow, but I'm not sure that that would really hold up like it needs to be to get it completely smooth, to get your surface very, very smooth. Then you'll hear oftentimes to put 2 popsicle sticks. Popsicle sticks are a little bit too thin for my taste on this. So I use these 2 strips of wood that are the same thickness that I don't remember where I got them exactly, but you can find them in the by the balsa wood and basswood displays that are in craft stores as well as in home improvement stores. And I will run this both ways, and that way I know that my clay is the same thickness across. And I just take care of it like this, rolling it back and forth. And that is ready to go. There we go. And then here was the little sample of Sculpey clay that I had left. Sculpey is one of the brands of polymer clay. It's what I happen to have on hand. There's no partiality to that. Okay, now we have everything set up for silk screening. And you may be asking, if you're not familiar, what is silk screening exactly? Is it just like a stencil? Well, silk screens are like stencils in that the paint transfers through the negative space. However, that's really where the similarity ends, because these are very fine mesh. You probably can't see it, but there's actually fabric in there. This is a real silk screen that I've had for at least 10 years that I used to silk screen this beautiful hydrangea onto linen fabric for table runners. And this is really the same concept. It's just a newer version of it, but you can see, if I get up really close, you can see that this is a fine fabric that I am pushing the paint through. When you're stenciling, you use a very gentle pouncing motion with your paintbrush so that it doesn't spread. With this, and I know the front because the SoCal Cutter Company is facing me, and I lay it onto the clay, and it sticks onto the clay so it doesn't move around. It's really nice for that reason. I tried it on dry clay. I had these hearts that, if you saw last week, I was demonstrating a paint treatment on that, and while I was experimenting, I thought, let me just see if the silk screen, and I couldn't get it to hold in place on that one. So I ended up smearing it, and then I tried to wash it off real fast. Well, the clay, this is a porous surface, and so it just soaked the paint right in. So you cannot use it, or I don't recommend you use it, on dry clay. I've got some paint pre-mixed here. I've got a squeegee type of thing that you're going to spread it with. And then what is really important, so that you can use these again and again and again, is I have a tray here that I'm putting water. And as soon as I pull this up, I'm going to set it down into the water so that my stencil or my silk screen can be reused again and again and again. Now, the other trick is to make sure that you've got a thick paint. You don't want a thin, runny paint because it will smear through this. And I'm just going to put some along the top here. A nice, generous thing. Because I just want to do it in 1 or 2 passes. And I'm not using a whole lot of pressure. It's a gentle pressure, just like that. And look at how easy that is. Now this is where my water comes in handy. I'm going to set that right in there so that nothing dries in that. You want to make sure that no paint dries in that fine fabric, or your silk screen will not be able to be used. But if you take care of it like that, you will be able to use it over and over and over again. The large hydrangea that I, excuse me, the large hydrangea that I showed you, I've used it probably 75, 100 times easily. Okay, so now we're back checking on the clay, and I can see where some of these, the paint is still a little bit shiny right up in here, which tells me that it's still a little wet, so we want to be careful. But we don't want to let it sit too long, because this is what happens, isn't that sad? When the air dry clay starts to dry before you have cut it, it just gets all yucky. Let's make a little sweetheart bunny, huh? We're going to do it like that, and then just press it down. And that will come up. And then let's make another one. It's starting to crack a little bit there. I maybe waited a little bit too long. And now what I'll do is I'm going to, everything that doesn't have the paint, I'm going to move off to the side here. So I can save all of that in one spot and reuse that clay. Don't throw that clay away. There we go. So that is all white clay. This that remains around there. This is just on the surface. So I could, if I can get this off in a big piece, I could come through and scrape that off if I want to. But I will probably use that for something else in a different way. Okay, then when you get that up high, see, you can come around here and you can smooth this down, even get your finger just a little bit wet and smooth that down if you need to. This clay is so wet that I don't feel like I needed to even get my finger wet to do that, but you can smooth down all those spots there. And that isn't that attractive on the gray background, but it will turn white just like this. Isn't that a sweet little heart? And we'll let that dry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put these that are to dry, because remember, this is our air dry clay. So it does not go in the oven, at least not yet. I do have a trick if you are getting anxious, because air dried clay does take time to get all the moisture through. Draw all that moisture out of it. So see how rough that edge is? I can come along with my fingertip and just do this. I can use a skewer to gently come in, and then you can also just sand it off after they're dry. But I kind of like to go through and do this as much as I can without distorting the shape. I'm going to see right down here. Okay, that looks different, doesn't it? Well, that's because I forgot that I wanted to show you this little trick to make with polymer clay. This works with polymer clay to make it more mounded like this one was. And it also helps with the issue that sometimes when you're working with small cutters, the clay, when you cut it, wants to stick inside there. That's another reason that you cut on a sticky surface, so that this clay is adhered to the sticky surface and helps it come up. This is just a sheet of saran wrap or a cling wrap or whatever food plastic product you have. Set that on it, push it down, cut through, lift it up, that's there. And look at how cool that is. It mounded it so pretty. You can use a misting bottle here and just mist your cutter just a little bit, and it will help keep it from sticking. So you can see the difference between the two cutting methods. See how this one is flatter and this one is more domed. So you can do either one of these, and aren't those sweet? You notice that this clay, and I bring it up here really close, it looks almost like a terrazzo type tile because it's got little chips in it, it's got little chips in it like a terrazzo tile might have. That's because this is the same piece of clay that I had screen printed with the roses just a few minutes ago. And when I realized I wanted to show you something else, it's like, oops, let me start over with that clay because it's the only white clay I happen to have on in the house right now. So that is a polymer clay. So that's why I did that. So I'm going to reuse this and cut one more little heart since we've got all this. And I really actually kind of like that look. I'm going to put my plastic over it again. And now I use a skewer or sometimes just a piece of wire, something kind of sharp to make a hole. Let's try it with a skewer this time. I'm going to put it right down in there. That's a nice round hole, maybe a little bit bigger, like that, so I can get something through. And here's where I can touch up those corners if I feel like they need them. I'm not going to try and catch up that because I can sand it down at the end. If I try and do it now, I'm going to mess up my heart, I'm afraid. This tray is what I've been using to bake clay for so long, and it's just 2 pie tins, and I've got it marked clay only. Be aware that polymer clay in particular is not food safe. So anything that you use in processing, making your clay, you do not want to use with food then. So these are all out of polymer clay and they are ready to go in the oven. I have a piece of batting in the bottom. It's been in there for 10 years minimum, 12, 15 perhaps. And that's because when the polymer clay, if it's sitting on something solid, then the bottom of it ends up kind of shiny, and I didn't want that. So I put the batting in the bottom, and they bake evenly, and there's no shiny spots. So I'm going to put this in the oven. It will go in the oven cold like this. I'll cover it, and then I'll put it in the oven. I'll set my temperature at 275 and let it heat up with the clay in there. You never put your clay into a hot oven when it's cold. You let it heat up with the oven. And then you turn the oven off and you let it cool down in the oven. Okay, so I just put the Sculpey clay pieces in the oven, and they are baking up now, and we'll see them in a little while. The air dry clay, the DOS pieces, I put on the parchment paper onto my cooling rack, and these will sit for 12 hours and like this, and then after 12 hours I'm going to flip them over so they're backside up then, and let them sit for another 12 hours. I have them elevated to just help keep air circulating around them, and on the parchment paper helps to so that they don't end up with this grid mark on the back side of them. Then at the end of that time, if they still need a little help getting them done because you're in a little bit of a hurry, here's one tip that I have used successfully so that I can kind of give them a little bit of boost. I'm not known for my patience. So you can take them like this into a cold oven and then set it to convection if you've got convection. I use convection and at the lowest setting that my oven will allow, which is 175. So I then convection bake them at 175 for about 20 minutes. I think it's typically about 20 minutes per quarter inch. And then I turn the oven off and let them sit in the oven and cool all the way down. You don't want to jolt them with a significant temperature change. So as the oven heats up, they're already in there, so it heats up with the oven and it cools down with the oven, okay? And then you take them out and hopefully then they're dry enough for you then at that point. And then you can sand them, polish them up. They'll be beautifully white at that point, and you can start decorating or doing whatever you have in mind with them. And next up, we'll do some of that fun things. What to do with your fun creations? How about seasonal accents in plants and in open shelving? How about for table settings and in tiered trays? And that's just for starters. Don't forget about gift wrapping embellishments too.